Hi everyone, it's MK. So in this video I'm going to show you how I take my quilt off of the quilt bar when I get to the end. Remember in my last video I explained the fact that I still like to use pins when I attach my quilt top to my leader. So I've stitched this entire quilt, I'm down to my very last pass, and I want to show you how I do the unpinning process. Let me just pause the camera and get you zoomed in so you can see my hands. So right now I am all the way over to the bottom right hand edge of my quilt, and I'm going to start removing the pins one at a time so that I can maintain even pressure and tension on my bottom edge of my quilt as I go along. So I start all the way over in the right hand corner, remove that pin, just make sure that this corner is nice and flat, and then I reinsert that pin. Now I'm going to go every other pin and reinsert the pin far enough away from the edge of my quilt so that when I go along the bottom and baste, my machine's not going to hit any of those pins. So I'm going to continue along all the way across the rest of my quilt, removing every other pin, and then I'll meet you back here. Okay, so I've done that. I've removed every other pin from the bottom edge of my quilt. Now what do I have to do? You guessed it. I need to remove the pins that are left in the leader so that I can completely free the bottom edge of my quilt. Okay, I have removed all of the pins from my leader, and I've just rolled my leader up so it's out of the way. Now the edge of my quilt is completely exposed, and it may be a little bit flipped up on the edges. I can just pat that down with my fingers. And now I'm going to start with my machine and I'm going to baste. On my bottom edge of my quilt, I like to baste from right to left. I don't know exactly why. I learned it that way, and that's the way that works well for me. So I'm going to bring my machine over. Okay, so I've pulled my machine all the way down to the right hand end. I'm going to now put my infinity panel into basting mode, and I used to baste the edges of my quilt just in a stitch per inch, whatever I was using. I've switched over to using the basting mode, first of all because it's very easy to switch to that on my infinity panel. And the second thing is I feel like when I'm basting, if I make a little bobble and I go into my edge of my customer's quilt a little bit too far, and they have to rip that out later when they're attaching their binding, I feel like it's easier for them to rip out a basting stitch than a regular length stitch. So I've switched over to the basting. It's very easy. I just come over to the edge, bring my thread up, and in my basting mode I just take a couple of stitches side to side to anchor that, and then I'm going to come right down the edge of the customer's quilt. When I get to this pin, I'm just going to gently pull that out of the way so that I don't hit it, and the rest of my pins along the edge are well enough out of the way so that I'm not going to hit any of those pins as I go across from right to left. Alright, so I've finished basting the bottom edge of my quilt, and I just want to do a really quick review in case you couldn't hear me because the machine was loud. So I bring my machine over to the right hand edge. I put my infinity panel into basting mode, and then I just do a needle down, pull up the thread, and I come gently down the right edge of my quilt until I approach that very first pin that was in the right hand corner. I gently remove that pin as I approach it so that I'm not going to hit it, and then I continue from right to left across the bottom edge of my quilt. So I hope you will continue to watch the next video because I'm going to be going through my steps for cropping off a pantograph on the last row of your quilt. And I know there's a lot of questions that I see online about that. So stay tuned. Thank you for joining me today, and happy quilting, everyone.